Very good afternoon to you. This is the Coburg. This is the final climb you will see on this, the Amstel Gold Race. The Netherlands' only classic race, the youngest of the Ardennes Classics, youngest of all the classics, actually. No less spectacular for it. The mixed, varied and quite interesting history of this race in its 46 years has made it a very demanding race indeed. Anybody who thinks that the Netherlands is flat should come to this province. It's Limburg, and it sort of reminds me where I used to live in Rutland in eastern England, in the East Midlands. It's a short, rolling climbs. And they're just all over the place. It's one climb after another, Amstel Gold. Very, very tough indeed. And actually, it makes it the most tough race to predict of all, because not only does it suit the short, punchy climbers like a Joaquim Rodriguez or an Alejandro Valverde, but it can also suit the out-and-out climbers, and in the, shall we say, the dark old days, if you look back at the records, some of the winners that won this race were definitely not climbers of any sort. So you can, if you've got the strength, you can be right there at the end. Paul Martens was a good example last year, 10th overall, the German riding for Rabobank, but if I remember, he was ahead of the peloton along with Ben Hermans, and they were caught on the Coburg at the end. Last year's winner, Philippe Gilbert, also won in 2010. Will he do the triple? Well, it's very unlikely that he will do the triple. His form has not been great. But he may well get back to something like form today. It's one of those things that he would really love to do, win the triple, but his form is just not good enough, really. I don't think he hasn't been in shape at all coming into these Liège tests, but you never know. He may suddenly just be striving for these. It's very difficult to say when you're so early in the year that your form is off. And especially if you're targeting something deliberate. That may well be, of course, that the nature of bike racing has changed slightly over the last 5 years, and for the better. And maybe we're seeing a return to some of the way that riders used to ride, targeting specific weeks, specific periods of the calendar to go for, and not looking as though they're in good shape before that, just that they're a little bit off and they're peaking at the time they want to do so. The man who knows all about that era of riding, this style of riding, although he hardly ever rode this race himself and didn't win it, mainly because he was on welter duties, is Sean Kelly. He's with me today in the commentary box. Sean, this is a real tough race, isn't it? Anybody who thinks the Netherlands is flat really should come and look at this.
Well, yes, everybody seems to think that when you talk about the Netherlands, it's all pan flat, but in this area, Limburg, it's certainly not at all. And we will see as we go out on this this final lap, which is 75 kilometers from the finish. There's a lot of hills, and when you look at today, you know, there's 31 categorized hills on this race, and there's a lot of other ones which they do not categorize at all. So there's a lot of up and down here. It's very, very undulating. I suppose the same as Belgium as well. A lot of people think when you talk about Belgium, when you go to the Ardennes, which is not that far away from this area where we are today. Also very, very difficult. It's a very demanding race, and I think this one is a real difficult race because of the roads. At the moment, we're on a big road, but a lot of very, very small roads, and it's a difficult race. If you're suffering a bit, if you're further back, for a long ways back in the peloton, then it's a very, very tough race and a tough place to be.
Yep, and also we've got the typical Netherlands, Dutch road furniture as well. Small roads going in and out of towns, lots of traffic islands. You'll notice in this race a little later on, they go across a road, or they certainly did last year and the year before, where it comes from a great big wide road with two carriageways on it, you know, one either way, obviously, and it just disappears into something that's like a bike path with great big bollards down the middle of it. Frank Schleck almost came a cropper on them last year. So it has its own style, doesn't it, Dutch racing, Sean? It's different. This is not, because we're in the low countries, this is not like Belgium.
Well, it's not like some of the Belgian races, I suppose, if you compare it with the Tour of Flanders, where it does turn around a lot in the final 60, 70 kilometres. The same here, because you do change direction a lot, where if you take a Liège-Bastogne-Liège, you start in Liège and out to Bastogne, and then you come back in the same direction. So you're having the big change in wind direction, where here you're changing all the time, and that is the difficult one as well. It's not only the climbs can cause a lot of problems for riders, it's also the windy conditions.
Yep, it's a pretty tough old race, this one. Okay, the course itself, 256.5 kilometres in length. Sean had me worried for a minute earlier. He said, God, it's longer than last year. I thought, oh, is it really? It can't be that much long. He said, no, it's 1.5 kilometres longer than last year. That 1.5 kilometres could prove vital, you know. Finishing on the Coburg, as we know, it flattens out towards the top, but it's 1,200 metres of riding. Most of it up, 800 metres of it uphill, and then it flattens out at the top. Manuel Kinziato is the man on the front for BMC. I can tell you, he's been there for about 35 kilometres. There is a break of 9 up the road. They're being brought back. We'll tell you about them in just a second. Welcome back. Live shots here on the Amstel Gold Race. Already, Twitter is aflood with people asking questions. It's at Spokesmen, S-P-O-K-E-S-M-E-N, if you wish to ask anything about this particular race, or the Ardennes Classics. Of course, we class this within the Ardennes Classics. It's not too far away, although we are actually in Limburg in the Netherlands. Steve O'Rourke saying, why is targeting 1 week better than the whole season for the sport? Just look at the results for maybe 10 years ago. Well, a bit more than that, 20 years ago. There's Johnny Hugeland. Must be in with a shout today, I would think, if he's in good shape. Hugeland, he'd like this sort of finish. The sort of riders who were winning this race were certainly not the sort of riders you would expect to be good in a hard climbing race all of a sudden. And what I meant by a single week of targeting things is that in the past you may have had riders who come in February and good, or March good, and they're good all year. And all year, year after year after year, which is slightly, always slightly difficult to comprehend. I think it used to be much more the case, Sean, that we're seeing perhaps this year. I'm just laying out there the possibility that people like Gilbert, we were talking about him, doesn't seem to be in good shape in the beginning of the year, but he's really targeting these 3 races more than anything else.
Yes, and the question is, you know, has he done that? Was that part of his training program? You know, last year he was going very well, real early, but you know, maybe he was a bit afraid that if he come into form too quickly this season for the Ardennes Classics, which is the ones really important for him from today. Then we go to Flèche-Wallonne midweek, and we, of course, we have the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, which is one of the monuments of the classics of the beginning of season. Possibly, you know, concerned about that, about holding his form, and maybe he's training, not trained as much, but it's just a problem riders have. 1 year do exactly the same training, you start at the same time, and the form doesn't come as quickly. You know, the body doesn't function, it doesn't work the same every year, and maybe that is a problem for Philippe Gilbert, but he was certainly, you know, on much better form much earlier last year. He is getting better. The question is today, will he have improved enough to be able to contest and to try and win this one today and go from there on? If he does win this one today, well, then he's coming into shape just at the right time, and he's going to be a danger man to take all 3 once again this year.
A good indication of this sort of training to just target a certain amount possibly could be Thomas Voeckler. Sean, we were talking about him, and he looks like he was struggling in Paris-Nice, pulling all sorts of faces. Like, he's a real old-style rider, isn't he? Pulls lots of faces and huffs and puffs and gets angry when he's not in good shape and rides himself into shape. Really good during the week.
Yes, well, we see that in Paris-Nice, and we did talk about it quite a lot, that Thomas, he wasn't in shape like he was last year in the Paris-Nice, where he won 2 stages, was very aggressive in breakaways. This year we did not see him at all, although as the race went on you could see there was that little improvement in the end of the Paris-Nice, but he's certainly, you know, coming better. Tour of Flanders, he was very much up there in the final in a race like that, where it's not his cup of tea. Flèche-Wallonne, which he won during the week, he won that very impressively, taking off, I think, was 25 plus kilometres from the finish from a group of about 25, 30 riders. And everybody's looking at him and was saying to themselves, where is he going? You know, at this time, at this time of the day, a long ways out on very difficult conditions. The rain and the cold weather was very bad conditions, and he just held off out there and held off Freire in the final, won by a handful of seconds. So that tells me he's coming into shape at the right time, and I think today and the next number of classics coming up, I think we will see more of Thomas Voeckler.
We have had a breakaway that's gone fairly early in the day, and 9 riders in that break. They've just been working well together, but the pelotons kept them under control. Largely the work has been done by BMC and Katusha, one man from each. Kinziata, as I said, has been on for the front for about 37.5 kilometres now, just driving himself along. The team that seems to be wanting to ride on their coattails and do nothing much to contribute at the moment is the Radio Shack Nissan team. They've got a whole raft of riders up towards the front, and all the other teams just happy to sit behind. The breakaway riders were Romain Bardet of AG2R Le Mondial, Pello Bilbao of Euskaltel, Cédric Pinault, Français du Jeu Big Mat, Creeder and Howes, both from Team Garmin Barracuda, Simone Stortoni of Lampre, Sebastian Delfos of Lambau Credit, Stephen Katsoven of the Accent Jobs Verandas Williams team, and Elliot Liete of Top Sport Vlaanderen. Of course, the two teams who will want to win this one are the two really big Dutch teams, Vacan Soleil and Rabobank, and they've brought massively strong teams, actually, both of them. Sean, I would say on paper Rabobank looks slightly more predictably tough and talented, whereas the Vacan Soleil team, they've got 2 or 3 wild cards in there, but all strong.
Yes, well, when you look at Vacan Soleil, they have some very good riders there, and I suppose when you look at Westra, who was, you know, so strong in Paris-Nice, it'll be interesting to see what he can do today. We have seen Johnny Hogel, and they are coming back to the car and getting some fresh bottles and some food. We see Rob Ruuk just coming back a moment ago, and they all seem to have stripped off. The 2 we see coming back to the cars, they haven't got their arm off, they're stripped down totally, and this is the point in the race at the moment where we're at the 60 kilometres, 63 kilometres to go. From the moment we went through the finish area, I think there's a space there where you can go to the car and you can risk coming back to the end of the bunch, because there's not any major hill for the moment, but they are certainly seem to be getting ready within the Vacan Soleil team to contest this final, and they have a lot of riders who should be able to be up there. Rabobank, as you said, you know, they have Gessing, who finished 9th last year. They have Paul Martins, who was 10th last year, so they have 2 riders already you know, who've been up there in the past, but they have, you know, Lars Boom, they have Breschel, they have a lot of very talented riders. Mollema should be up there. You know, they have tanking, they have a very, very powerful, you know, a team with a lot of depth. Absolutely.
63 kilometres to go, 4 minutes around the gap. One rider who won't be contesting it towards the end today, Cadel Evans, he's packed. He's gone from the race. We saw him just before we came on air. He was lurking around the back, a little group that dropped off the back, but with, you know, big rouleurs like Christophe Kern and so forth, all sitting at the back, riders who were never going to feature at a hill finish. And Evans was just happy to be sitting in there. We wondered what he was doing. We wondered if he'd gone back for a natural break, but he's gone from the race now. This is what the delights of racing in the Netherlands. Look, stuff all over the road. We're going to take another commercial break. The 4 minutes is the gap. 62 kilometres to go. Welcome back. Here is the break. As you can see, 9 men: Bardet, Bilbao, Pinault, Creeder, House, Stortoni, Katsoven, Delfos and Liete. Stortoni seems to be doing quite a lot of work on the front when it comes to the climbs, but you could have guessed that Lambau Credit, Top Sport Vlaanderen and the Verandas Williams team would have put somebody in the break. Likewise, Euskaltel, 4 minutes, 61 kilometres to go. They've got to keep working together. Try and keep this rolling on as long as possible. Too many big names in this race to let this one get too far up the road to bring back. Philippe Gilbert, winner last year and the year before. Triple, is it on? Well, who knows? There's not that many people who've done the triple, Sean. That is this race. Flèche will on in the middle of the week, and Liège-Bastogne-Liège next weekend. He being one of them. David Rebellin being another. You didn't get the chance to do that, really. I mean, you didn't get to race this race very often.
Well, I did get the chance.
Well, you got the smaller chances.
There were a few chances because I did not take part in the Amstel Gold Race on many occasions because the Tour of Spain, it was at this time of year. It started in April, and you know, riding for a Spanish team, I was always on duty at the Tour of Spain, so missed Amstel Gold in my best years. That's my excuse for not winning.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Did you like racing in Holland or in the Netherlands, shall we say? Or was it the sort of racing that you always slightly feared perhaps there was something going to be in the way? I mean, I don't suppose there was as much road furniture then as there is now.
No, not as much road furniture, but still, you know, it's all the time turning left and right. You can never relax there, sit back in the peloton in 50th position because it's always very technical and very dangerous. So you have to ride up front. And of course, if you're riding well, you can ride in the top 25, 30 miles and just stay up there. Then it's a great race because everybody is suffering behind. As we can see here, with Sagan, actually, you know, they're going to get back in here, but the riders who we can see on the end of the bunch, the last 25 riders, they are always getting it much more difficult in some other races where if you have a big large road, you're going the same direction all the time. You can sit on the tail end of the peloton and get carried along for a long time. Here it doesn't work. You turn direction so much that you're in the wind a lot, and you know, you're hanging on the side of the road, hanging in the gutter, and you get blowing out the rear door very quickly.
Presumably, if you're chasing back on again as well, it's a bit like a sort of enormous giant Kermesse race as well. Every time you get out of a corner, you've got the wind hitting you, you've got to sprint back on as well. Yes,
and depending on where you have a mechanical problem, when you're in the cavalcade of cars, if you're in a sector where it's turning a lot, and there is a lot of that here, it's left and right all the time, then it's difficult in the cavalcade because the cars, they slow down, they speed up suddenly, so it's difficult to stay behind them. We're on a straight road, which we are on now, and for Sagan, he's in a good position here. He can draft from the cars, and they're going pretty much in, you know, a straight line for a moment, so not a bad time to have a mechanical.
Peter Sagan, the Slovakian national champion, here at the back. There is the sort of tail end of the peloton then. This is a young man who is very, very much up and coming. I've said it a number of times, worth saying again, reminds me of the sort of rider that Sean might have been at this age. He could well be a sort of Kelly type rider, can turn his hands to all sorts of things, but he's still got a couple of years perhaps, Sean, but he's really knocking on the door. As he's from last year, he's improved immeasurably.
Yes, well, from last year there's a big improvement there, and you know, we've seen him, he's just improving all the time. When you say very young, he is really young at the moment. What is he, 23? I think if he is that at the moment, so he has a lot of years ahead of him, and you know, he's able to sprint, he can get up short climbs very well, he's a very good bike controller, and he can ride all sorts of races. He can ride the classic races where we see him in the Tour of Flanders. He was very impressive there. I think a little bit tactically he didn't you know it well enough. We could see that he seemed to be chasing on his own a lot of time behind that group of Bonin and Pozzato, but you know, a real powerful rider, and you know, can ride so many different types of races. The Cobble Classics, here he is today. I think we will see a lot of him in the final today, and the days to come, Flèche-Wallonne, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, he will be also there. So he has a huge talent and a big future ahead of him.
Yep, stick your neck out for a minute, Sean. How long do you think, if you were his director sportive, or as you are now, an expert commentator, expert opinion, how long before you think he can win a major classic? Because he's going to win one at one point.
Well, I'd not be surprised if we see him winning one this week. The way he's going at the moment, the last number of weeks, he's going super. very, very impressive. On Wednesday, I see him there in the Brabant-Sapel. He did crash out on a roundabout on the wet road, but I'd not be surprised if we see him taking a classic this week, and that goes from today. This one today, the finish uphill here, it suits him, you know, very well. And if he arrives with a group, he is going to be a big danger man in the final sprint with a group of 20-25 riders, because he is very, very explosive. And you know, he's like Philippe Gilbert was last year, you know, so explosive on the uphill finishes. He will be in the final. If he gets into the final today, if he's on a good day, he's certainly a one to be real careful with.
Still some climbs to come. The Wolfsberg is next, out to 215, well, nearly 216 kilometres, followed by the Lurberg, Gulperberg again, which we went up just before we came on air. Kreuzberg, Eisenbosberg, Fromberg, Keutenberg, and then the Coburg once again. I mean, just how difficult is this finish, Sean?
Well, the finish is very difficult because it's what you have leading into it, and of course, you know, the run into it, the Keutenberg, those ones are very, very difficult. And there's, you know, there's Kreuzberg, as you said, so there's 3 or 4 of them, and when you get over the Keutenberg, like, it's 11 kilometres to the finish. The other ones are 15 kilometres out, 19 kilometres. So in the last 20 kilometres, you have very difficult terrain, and of course the finish itself with that 1200 meters uphill, it's a difficult one after 256 kilometers of racing. And I think this racing here with 256 kilometers, if you go to Liège, as I said, you have big roads all the time, you haven't all that slowing down and trying to gather up your speed again. It's a very demanding race, this one, and everybody, you know, will be suffering in the end, no matter how good your shape is. It's all about, you know, the fitness, I think, will be the ones who will survive and come out in the end. But you have to be able to sprint as well, the explosive ones who can put up a very good sprint on the uphill. And as we mentioned, Sagan, Gilbert, Schleck, of course, he's at a little bit of a disadvantage because he hasn't got that explosive burst in that final couple of 100 metres. So riders like that are going to have to go further out.
3:48 is the gap. They're under 60 kilometres to go. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll look at the runners and riders and the big favourites and who is in real shape and why it is so difficult to try and pick a winner for this sort of race. 3:46 the gap, 57 kilometres to go. 9 men in the break. Welcome back. Wolfsberg is the next climb up, then the Lurberg, Gulperberg, Kreuzberg, Eisenbosberg, Fromberg, Keutenberg and Coburg. Over 30 categorized climbs on this particular ride. Somebody asking, is this the, who is it, Stephen asking, is this the race with the most categorized climbs of any UCI calendar race, including grand stages? I doubt it. There's a lot of them, but Mergeland's got even more than this. Matty Breschel waiting for the Team Cup. Clearly would want to do something today, and he's clearly getting a little bit better all the time. Wasn't too bad in Flanders. Had a troubled couple of years. Very interesting character. Those of you who are regular cycling followers will know that he made his money. Oh dear. Slight concertina effect. That'll help, Chris. Who's gone off? Oh. It's the men from Lotto. Dear, oh dear. It's Jurgen van den Broek. And Van den Broek was hoping to be up there today and maybe struggle a little bit towards the end. Probably a bit too punchy for him, but down on the deck. So he might be a little bit sorer now. Quite a good team they've got. De Grief, Meersman, Van der Broek and Vanendert, all capable of the climb. Which brings us neatly, of course, to why this race is so difficult to think of a winner, because essentially, Sean, it boils down to the fact that you can be a short, punchy classics climber like a Joaquim Rodriguez, for example, or an Alejandro Valverde, or if you're on a really good day, you can be a proper climber like Frank Schleck, for example, and do equally well.
Yes, you can, and you can also be a sprinter, because when you look at Oscar Freire, he can, you know, do very well here. And when you look down at, you know, the winners of the past, Eric Zabel won here. But when you go a bit further down, of course, we didn't finish on the Coburg every year, but still there was a lot of climbing to be done. So, you know, if you can ride up front all day and you're really in good shape, a sprinter can win it. And Oscar Freire, you know, we can see there Katusha doing a lot of riding, and they have, I suppose, two men they can play. They can play Rodriguez and Oscar Freire. So it's a race where, you know, it's much more difficult to pick out a winner. As we talked about that before we came on air, you know, you could look down through the start list and there's probably 25 to 30 riders who could, you know, be on the winning podium here this evening.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, we put a yellow marker pen line through the riders who could do well, as Jurgen van den Broek looks a little bit sore. He tumbled off in the middle of the peloton. He's got Francis de Grief just behind him. I think the other rider is Vanendert, but I wasn't really looking at him. Striking a line through those riders who you think might well have a chance if they're in good shape or in the right place and so forth. There's a couple who've already gone. I mean, Evans, for example. But you could just read it out. I mean, BMC have Gilbert and Greg Van Avermaet. Van Avermaet's sort of lurking around the 4-5 place mark in the races a couple of weeks ago. AG2R, Cherel, Nocentini maybe if he's in great form, Riblon, we don't know, he was going quite well in Milan-San Remo. Euskaltel have got Samuel Sanchez in Team Garmin. I don't think Ryder Heisdale's quite got the form, but Dan Martin, Van Simmeren's going quite well, although the end of it might be quite difficult for him. Whoops. Very, very difficult. This terrain, get round all the time. They just seem to have missed the corner.
No, I think
did they get quacked there?
I think they're going to the showers. A shorter
really
way.
Short way back.
Yes, yes. I think Breschel, it looks like that he just had enough. And you know, as we said earlier, this race you turn around a lot, and if you know the area, like there's a lot of ways to get back by a shorter way, and it looks like Breschel is taking that one.
Well, that's one we can cross off the list then. But if you even without the teams, just read off the names: Gasparotto, Iglinsky, Kieselowski, Madrazo, Valverde. Although Valverde looks to be struggling down the back just a little bit. De Grief, Meersman. We've seen Van den Broek, who's in trouble, having just tumbled a little bit. But Vanendert, Sagan, Nibali, Rodriguez, we've talked about. Freire can get up there. Gerrans, of course, racing today. I reckon Simon Gerrans is in with a pretty good shout if he can have sustained that form, and that's quite a big ask, isn't it, Sean? He's in absolutely super top form during Milan-San Remo. We're a few weeks down the line now. It's not always easy to keep that form.
No, not always easy, but again, you know, Simon Gerrans, I think, you know, Milan-San Remo, he just got it right, perfect on the day, was in really good shape, and you know, since that he's probably, you know, had it a little bit easier, scaled it down a bit, and come back for the Ardennes Classics, as we call them. And you know, last year he finished third here, so he, you know, he knows it very well. I think we should see Simon Gerrans in the final today.
Omega Pharma quick step without the all-conquering Tom Bonen today, but Sylvain Chavanel gets a chance. He's got Dries Devenijns with him. He's also got strongman Nicky Terpstra, although Terpstra must be feeling a bit tired by now. Mind you, not so much Chavanel, although his powers of recovery are particularly good. Rabobank, we've already talked about the strength of their team. They've lost one of their men, by the look of it, Matti Breschel, but they've got Hessink, Steven Kruiswijk, who I think might be quite good today. Bauke Mollema again is another man who's got a bit of a punchy climb, even though he's slightly more on the pure side. He's got a good finish. Ben Hermans, Chris Horner, Maxime Montfort, and both the Schleck brothers for Radio Shack Nissan. That's a pretty strong team, Sean.
Yes, it is a very strong team, and you know, I'm not surprised that we see some of those teams putting men up to the front there. We see Radio Shack, BMC have been to the front a lot today, and you know, they have a number of riders within the team that can put up a performance, and I think maybe they want to, you know, pull this one back a bit early. They don't want to leave it go to the very final in the last 10 kilometres where they can pull back these men in the break. And the different tactics come into, for example, Radio Shack Nissan, because with the Schleck brothers, they need to be able to attack a bit further out, so they want to be sure that they can control this breakaway of 9 riders and make sure that they pull it back a bit earlier, you know, before the final 20 kilometres. Maybe they're hoping to do that.
Sky, well, you could drop a pin in that, the Sky list. We're not really sure at all who... they've got Edvald Bosenhagen, but he didn't look on top form last weekend in Paris-Roubaix. Different type of race, and I wonder whether he's just a little bit off the very top that he needs to be. We saw how strong Matt Heyman is. How much did he leave on the road last week? Has he recovered? Thomas Lundqvist, well, if he's on good form, then he could do something. Maybe Nordhaug Sandio if it's not too bad, but again, nobody really stands out on that particular squad today, Sean. Not to me anyway.
No, not really. That when you look at the other big favourites, it's difficult to see where they could get a good place here, get on the podium. It looks difficult, but you never know. We've seen in the past in the final of this race, it depends on what way the race goes in the final. If there's a lot of aggressive racing, a lot of attacks, well then Sky would have riders who are capable of getting into the breakaway. But I think if it goes down to a group of 20-25 riders in the final and it comes to a final sprint, I find it hard to see who from Sky can make it onto the podium.
Fantastic the way the Lotto car has joined the peloton there, I think. We'll take a short break. Well, they're still trying to work their way back on, are the three men from Lotto. Oh, he's coming up for another tow. They're struggling here, Sean, to get back on, and you've got to say they've used this car fairly extensively. Yes,
they're getting away with a lot here, because we did see a Commissar's car coming back there some time ago, and I think that's the reason they had to get away from the riders. They have been riding for many kilometres behind it, and it looks like they're going to make it now. And Jürgen van der Broek, of course, he was stopped on the road for a long time, lost a lot of time there, and it's been a long chase for them to get back, but it looks like they're just about going to make it.
Mark Corsi saying, how can you say no one stands out for Sky? What about Sergio Elise Henio, one of the best climbers on the start list? Well, I just did. Looking at the form book, it's difficult to know who. He might well be up there, but it's difficult to know who they're riding for or who the big favourites are there. I don't think any of them stand out on form at the moment, particularly. Saxo Bank, well, Karsten Kroon, he was second, I think, to Sergei Ivanov a few years back. Chris Anker Sorensen, if he's on form, although I don't think he's displaying the sort of really gung-ho killer form that we've seen last year. Not just yet. Vakon Soleil then, let's have a look at them. The other big Dutch team here. Carrara, Hogeland, Pim Lidgaard, and what about Louis Westra as a wild card? We now know he can have a short punchy climb, or is it just a little bit too fast for him, Sean?
Well, on his performance in Paris-Nice, he should be able to stay up here in the final if he's still on anything like the form he had in the Paris-Nice race. He was getting up the climbs so impressively, and we see him down there in Mont on that very steep climb of about 3 kilometres. The way he just rode away from all the big favourites in that final 400-500 metres. If he can, have them sort of legs today, as they say in cycling, well, then he should be very much there in the final.
There's Walt Pauls as well. Just on your screen, we haven't mentioned him, but he can climb pretty well as well. Pim Lidgaard, the champion of the Netherlands, road champion of the Netherlands, getting slightly better all the time at the climbing. Rob Roode, of course, can climb pretty well. A pretty strong team. They will definitely be in with in the final somewhere, trying to do something. Verandas Williams, really difficult to see past Staff Sheerlinks as a possible rider. Farnese Vini, well, your guess is as good as mine, Sean, in there. Oscar Gatto, Fiali maybe. But I don't see anybody standing out particularly now they have not got Pipo Pozzato.
No, I don't think. Again, it depends on what way we have this final 25 kilometres of the race. As we can see here, 46 kilometres to finish, 3 minutes of an advantage for our breakaway. If they start to come back quickly, and it depends on how much they have left up front, because they have been out for a long time today, and this parcours very energy sapping. If it comes back to this, 30 kilometres from the finish, 25 kilometres to finish, there will be a lot of attacking there, and that's where some of the teams, the smaller teams, with some pretty good riders, Williams, for example, Farnese, as you mentioned. We could see, you know, some of those riders trying to get into a move and a breakaway, and it has happened in this race where, you know, a group of riders get away and some of them actually hold on to the finish. I think when Ivanov won,
that's right,
he attacked in the very final with a couple of riders and went on alone and held on. So that's where I think the smaller teams will have a chance of, you know, getting their best men up the road and try and get away from the bigger names, because if you go into the final in the final sprint with the big names, well, then they have no chance.
Smaller teams, we've already talked about Verandas, Williams, Top Sport, Vlaanderen, and maybe Peter Jacobs, possibly the man on best form at the moment, who was pretty good in Kent Vervelke. The Argos Shimano team, Simon Geschke possibly is the only one with a kick towards the end that seems to be in reasonable form. And as far as Landbau credit go, well, again, it's you could stick your pin in the list of riders. Belamakos, Honig, David Kumain, Bert de Waal, Sebastian Delfos, who's in the break, of course, Kurt Hoverlink, and Jidvaikas. Quite a number of teams not riding with a full strength squad. They've only got 6 or 7 riders. Francis de Jure, AG2R, Landbau credit all have less than a full complement. 44 kilometres to go, 2:56. It's beginning to look a little bit more serious, Sean. They're not going to shut them down just yet, but the action will be sort of kicking off in the last 30k here.
Well, I think, again, when you look at what we have left, 44 kilometres from the finish, and when you get to that 40 kilometres to go, then we have quite a lot of climbs coming in there. The Wolfsberg, the Luerberg, the Gulkenberg, they're all coming hot and heavy and very quickly, and I think that's where the race will start, you know, to speed up back in the peloton. Everybody wants to be up in the front, and that, you know, equals upping in pace in the main peloton, and that's going to be the problem for the breakaway, I think. As you get into this final 40 kilometres, there's so many climbs there that they come, you know, very quickly, one after the other, and that's where I think the advantage will melt down very quickly for our breakaway guys.
Yeah. 2:54 is the gap. They finish on the Coburg. Keutenberg before that, Fromberg, Iser Bosweg and Kreuzberg running out in the last 30 kilometres of this race. Philippe Gilbert has won the last 2 editions. Before that it was Ivanov, Damiano Cunego. Frank Schleck has won here, and they are the only riders riding. Gilbert, Cunego and Schleck have won this event before. Welcome back live. Nice to see my erstwhile tandem colleague Jez Hastings on Twitter today. Don't you think that Verandas Williams kit looks like our Whittle kit? There we go. Back with the rear of the peloton, and Wout Poels is not having a good time here. The Vacances Soleil rider, he's sort of been hanging around the back and doesn't look very happy at all. The speed has just upped very slightly. They're just turning the screw little by little by little. 42 kilometres to go. 2:45, and it doesn't look very good for Poels here, Sean.
No, not at all. I think he's starting to suffer, and if you're suffering at this time in the race, well, then it's pretty much game over, and I'd not be surprised if we see him like Breschel and another rider there taking the shorter road to the showers.
Indeed. Actually, you could take the short road to the showers here, because this is one race that just goes everywhere, it crisscrosses everywhere it could possibly could. It's confined to the Limburg area and just goes backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And it's always been that way. When it was first introduced, this race, it was billed as being 280 kilometres, but the 2 organisers of the race, when they first started it, they failed to take into account the fact that they'd have to go across lots of bridges to get over all the rivers in this area, and it added an extra 40 kilometres to the race. First edition was in 1966, won by the French rider, former world champion, of course, Jean Steblinski, the loyal lieutenant for Master Jacques, Jacques Anquetil, teammate of Vin Denson's. And I think there were 3 or 4 of the Ford France team at that time who made it into the top 4 after 300 odd kilometers of racing. But it's always been a very, very tough race, this one. Now, you used to be able to get your weight in beer at the end, Amstel beer at the end, which is, of course, more than enough incentive for some of us to ride, but haven't seen it done for a number of years. The Dutch desperate to take a classic win here. The last time a Dutchman won the Amstel Gold Race was a long, long time ago. It was Eric Dekker back in 2001, and it's been very sparse for them since then. Michael Bogart and Dekker both made their impact on this race, both riding for Rabobank, and they'd be desperate to get another win. And Rabobank would really like it, wouldn't it? Because it shows history and continuity for them, and it would certainly help their esteem within the country. But Vacansoleil just as much would like to take away that glory of having a Dutch winner here in the Dutch Classic.
Yes, certainly for the Dutch teams, it's a big event, a very important race of the year, and they will be all trying to take the victory today. The race in itself for all the teams, it's first of all, it's one of the classics now. There's the points which are so important to all the teams, but for a Dutch team to win here, it would be a major coup today if Rabobank or Vacansoleil could put one of their riders on the top step of the podium.
Yeah. Wolfsburg, 800 meters of such, the breakaway. Beginning to be a little bit more rocking shouldered as they come to the 40 kilometre to go mark. It is a tough old race, this. I don't know who else has ridden around the UK or, well, not so much Europe, or we're in Limburg, but certainly does remind me of where I used to be in Rutland or the Cotswolds or bits like that. Some of those short, tough climbs down the sort of Bath area, or as I say, back up in Rutland.
And we're at the point of the race, I suppose, 215 kilometres covered. That is where a lot of the riders start getting into difficulty. The 200Ks, the professionals, they all can ride that very, very strong, but to be able to ride at that, that extra 256 kilometres, as we can see now, Astana taking it up. And this is what I think a lot of riders are now, as we could see in the group there was a lot of movement, riders trying to move their leaders up, all afraid that if a team take it up and really, turn up the gas, put on the pressure, if you have a little bit of side wind, that's where you can find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time. And again, it's still going on here. Teams just coming up with 2 or 3 the same team members coming together, and that's just keeping their leaders on the front of the bunch.
Yeah, Astana have suddenly all been marshalled and sent to the front. They've got 3 riders capable of a win in this sort of terrain. Enrico Gasparotto, Maxime Iglinsky and Robert Kieselowski. But there's a bit of action here now. Everybody wanting to get up towards the front. Johnny moving his way up towards the run. Hugeland there for Vacansoleil. Carrara looks like the rider third back there, with the Lotto rider sandwiched in between them. Bauke Mollema from Rabobank in the orange and blue and white, directly in the middle of your shot. Some of the bigger names coming up towards the front now, trying to keep things out of trouble. There's Kunigo, head down, as he tends to do for quite a while, with the fluorescent stripes on the front of his Villiers frame. A little bit of nervousness shown on all these riders trying to get to the front, as you say, keep out of the way. The Dutch would dearly, dearly love to win, as we say here. Last win for a Dutchman was Eric Dekker back in 2001, although they do hold the outright record for wins. Jan Raas. And yeah, Raas actually won 4 on the trot between, I think it was 77 and 80, or 78 and 81, 77 and 80, I think. Merckx has won 2, the Belgian. Knetemann, another great Dutch rider, with 2. Rolf Jarman, the Swiss rider, 93 and 98, won 2 editions of this race. Was he a teammate of yours at the time, Sean, with Skill, or were you on from there by that time?
No, I think Garmin, he won with, was it with a Swiss team? I don't think...
I thought he was a Skill rider at the time.
No,
nope.
No, not at that time when he won the race here.
Riders who won the race before, who are riding today: Kunogo 2008, Frank Schleck won as far back as 2006. He'd really love to repeat that, certainly. 2010 and 2011 wins for Philippe Gilbert, and as far as I'm aware, none of the directors sportives here today have won this race, not that I know of. There's Andy Schleck, trying to keep themselves out of trouble. Chavanel up towards the front now, the French national champion. The pace has certainly been upped, and there's some very tired faces, even on the on some of the bigger riders. Wouldn't be at all surprised if Chavanel's very tired now, Sean. He's done a lot of work already for the Cobble Classics.
Yes, Chavanel, he was in real good shape, and unfortunately last week we see him, the moment he had his flat when Bonan was going in the attack, it was just the worst moment to have a mechanical, and it's been interesting today. I think he could be up here very much in the end of the stage today, and we could see him, you know, going in the attack as he does in the final 10-15 kilometers.
Amstel Gold Race, the youngest of the Ardennes, so-called Ardennes Classics, although we're in Limburg here with AG2R Le Mondial's Romain Bardet trying to keep the pace high in the breakaway of 9 riders, which is now beginning to fracture, as you can see. 1:44 is the gap over the peloton. Bardet, Stortoni, and I think House are just trying to pull away. They keep going. Bilbao has joined them. They want to keep the pace rolling here. They've got 37 kilometers to go. Some riders clearly not capable of following. Cedric Pinot is down the road by the look of it, as is, I think, Elliot Lieta and Stephen Katoven of the Verandas Willems team, and Lieta of Top Sport Vlaanderen. Yeah, they are further down the road with Cedric Pinot. I was wrong, actually. Sean has just pointed out one of the director sportives who's a winner here, Eric Van Lancker, back in 1989. Suited to this sort of race, Van Lancker?
Yes, he was that style of rider as well, who could, you know, really win those style of races, this sort of parkour, and you know, he was a number of years there. He was, you know, really up there in the classics all the time, and managed to win this one on one occasion. We can see there in the group that there's a bit of movement there. I think there's quite a few of these 9 men in the break who are, you know, without their ticket there to be in that group, and they just want to get rid of them because it's upsetting the breakaway. And now we see this, the 4 riders who are pushing on to try and go alone. As we can see, one of the men we talked about earlier, Sorensen, having a go, and he needs to go a long ways out as well. But at this point, you know, it's a difficult one to do. He's probably just trying to, you know, up things a bit and try and get away with a number of riders. He's hoping that there will be a few riders come across him, and that's the way he's got to do it, because for Nicky Sorensen, he has to, you know, get away a long ways out. Or Chris Anke Sorensen, sorry.
Yep, that's Chris Anke with his bobbing, nodding head. Here we are. Chris Anke Sorensen from Saxo Bank, Denmark's national gurning champion, as well as professional bike rider. And to string the peloton out a little bit now are riders from Omega Pharma, Quickstep, Sky, and Farnese Vini. Sylvain Chavanel will fancy his chances today. We've seen nothing of Thomas Voeckler though, but he was pretty impressive midweek, and seems to be coming around gently, coming around in time for these Ardennes Classics. Just 4 men remain out of the original 9, and they've got the hammer down now to try and stay away. It's Alex Howes of the Garmin Barracuda team, Bardet of Romain Bardet of AG2R Le Mondial, the back, the very tall rider. We saw him early in season trying to just push away, and it was Catalonia, wasn't he? He went on a break in one of the last 10 kilometers of a stage. He was in good shape. That's interesting. Edvald Bosenhagen riding up right the way towards the front here, Sean, and you'd have assumed that if he's one of the favourites, he wouldn't have been working or trying to stay right up at the front here at this point. There'd be another teammate up here, so you would think that Sky are possibly working for one of the other teams, or one of the other riders. Well,
we have to wait and see if Bosenhagen is going to do some work on the front. He's sitting there, you know, in about 5th or 6th position, but that doesn't mean he's going to do something. He just maybe just moved up on a corner and found himself very much at the front, and it looks like he's not going to take up the pace setting here. He's just leaving himself slip back a bit further in the bunch, and it's not Sky who are going to do the riding. We can see here at the moment there's quite a few teams. Astana took it up for a while there with a few riders. Katusha there. They're starting to look at each other, and they know with 35 kilometers to go, 122, they're probably saying, well, you know, we don't want to ride too much here now. And the big thing goes on between the teams as well. Well, we're not riding on our own. You guys have a favourite. You have two guys capable of winning here. You put a man up here in front, and I think that discussion is on at the moment at the front end of the bunch. And also back in the team directors' cars, you know, they talk to each other. They say, well, you know, we have to start riding together here. We're not going to control the race, and we can see BMC are at it once again. That's something this year. In all the classics, the BMC team have been riding a lot on the front of the bunch, but riding a lot, but no Bauke at the end of the day, and hopefully today they can, you know, correct that.
Well, yeah, Gilbert wearing the Belgian champions jersey. Remember, look out for him. Van Avermaet is in pretty good shape. Here's a man who has ridden on the coattail of another team to get back up to this breakaway. Sebastian Delfosse didn't look as though he wanted to push on too much. Here's the back, Delfosse from Lambau Credit. Much brighter green than they used to have. I mean, you can see it very easily in the peloton. I can't say I like it as much as the old dark green, fern green colours they had. There we are. It's BMC back on the front of the peloton once again. Rockfist for Sky riding up towards the front. Cascade's got a cascade on underneath his helmet with a bright blue peak on it. 32.5 kilometers to go, and 117 is the gap. They're trying hard, these guys here. They've shed a couple. Steven Kotoven from the Accent Jobs Randers Williams team has gone out the back door, as has Elliot Liete of Topsport Vlaanderen. Largely to be expected, I guess, Sean. I mean, they are smaller teams. Sometimes they specialise in trying to get people in the break. It's about the only chance sometimes that they get.
Yes, well, that's you know, part of the team tactic. They get into those big classic races, and then the team briefing would be the morning. Okay, guys, a breakaway, 4 or 5 riders plus, you have to be in it, and that's where they get the exposure, you know, for their sponsors. And, you know, Ascent Williams Veranda, that's, you know, one of the teams will be certainly looking for that. Lambau Credit, you know, also they would have been, you know, under orders to make sure that they have a man in the break. And if you succeed in doing that, well, then it's a partly successful day for the team. And I'm not surprised that, you know, the riders from those teams we see up there are starting to struggle at the moment. Again, when you get to that 200 plus kilometers, it's there where a lot of riders you know, start to get into difficulty, and it's only the real, you know, the real strong riders or the good domestiques, they can also go on for much further and go to that 250 kilometer mark.
Race is now organised and run by ex-professional Leo van Vliet, although it was started many years ago by Herman Krot and Ton Wiesers. Krot actually ran the amateur team, the Amstel beer team. Was pretty successful actually. He brought a load of riders through. I think Knetemann was one, Ternisa was another, as well as Van Vliet himself. But it's had all sorts of ups and downs, this race. It's not always been the most organised race in the world, certainly in its early form, but it's really matured into a proper classic. It's amazing. I'm not quite sure when the term classic can be used, really, as a race. Not very long into its history, I wouldn't imagine, because if you look at the Strade Bianchi, that race in itself is already being referred to as an early season Italian classic, and it's only been going about 4 or 5 years, 6, 7 years, not very long anyway. Was it already considered a classic by the time you turned professional, Sean? I mean, they would only been 10 years old.
Yes, it was a classic, and of course, you know, you have the classic status, but then you have the monuments, and you know, the monuments are the Milan-San Remo, Tour of Flanders, Roubaix and Liège, and then you have the classics, which they all come under classic names, and you have the Flèche Wallonne is another one. But you know, certainly this race, I think in the last 10 to 15 years it has, you know, become more important, and that's because of a number of reasons. I suppose, you know, there's a lot of UCI points for the teams to be taken here today, and that's what makes it very important. But it's definitely, you know, a race where I think it has built over the years and has, you know, become a more important race for all the pro teams.
1:10 to these remaining breakaway riders. 6 of them, 3 of them have just been swept up by the peloton, as you can see. South African fan at the side of the road. And this is now going to feel very hard work indeed, with 1 minute just over remaining. At about 30 seconds, the neutral service car and the other cars, following cars, will come past these remaining breakaway riders, and then they know that the game is almost up. The peloton will be upon them pretty quickly, and it is this last 30 kilometers that will really sort out the men from the boys now, and we'll start to see splits in the group. 30 kilometers. See the Golperberg, Kreuzberg, Isa Bosweg, the Fromberg, Keutenberg, and then up the Coburg once again. Crowds are good today, Sean, in the Coburg.
Yes, but the Amstel Gold in the last years, and even going back in the time I was competing, it was a race which, you know, was very well supported. And of course in Holland they love their cycling, in this area especially, and with the weather being, you know, better as the day go on. It did start out where it was wet this morning. You can still see some places on the road where it's a little bit wet on the side. It helped to bring out the crowds with the weather clearing up, and it's pretty much of a standard thing that we get very big crowds at the finish area in this one every year.
This is the new strip for the Argos Shimano team, formerly known as what we called the Project team, because its name was just so ridiculously, stupidly difficult to say all the time. Now just called the Argos team. Argos Shimano. Bid for freedom. And when a couple of riders go away, Sean, that a bigger team can see them going up the road, they often use it as a springboard to just put a sort of safety man up there, really, and we've got that with Omega Pharma Quickstep there.
Yes, well, there's always teams, you know, who will just put a man up there if there's a group getting away, and even the bigger teams sometimes, you know, they just decide to work that tactic. When you look at a team like Radio Shack Nissan, for example, or Rabobank, they just throw a man into the breakaway, and then it takes a bit of the pressure off. They do not have to do the chasing, and that's a great position to be in, because if you can, you know, keep your men for much more later in the race, it's a great advantage here. And for your leader, if you can be with him to the very, very final, even to the final sprint, just to get him into that final 1200 meters and position for the sprint up here on the Coburg. It's so important here in this one, and there's going to be a lot of riders in the final. It's not like the Paris-Roubaix or the Tour of Flanders, where you have maybe a small group out front and then a small a group maybe of 10 or 15 riders chasing. Here we have a very big group of 60 plus riders at the moment.
Teams not allowing that small group to get away. I'll tell you why, because Maxime Iglinsky managed to just slip away in that little group, and they want to keep the pace high enough, shut that one down. David Tanner was in there for Saxo Bank. He's done well to stay in that team. Jan Huget was also in there, just a speculative little push onwards. Matteo Rabottini also in the group. In fact, it was Huget who decided to go for it first. We're on the Golpenberg again. This is quite a stiff little climb, this one, Sean, and it's very narrow as well.
Yes, it is a stiff one. As you go further on, it just gets that bit steeper, but very narrow as well. And you know, back in the main bunch with that very big group of riders, it's going to be very nervous. That you know, everybody just want to be in that top 30 positions, and it's, you know, it's the teams who will start, you know, preparing for their leaders now, as we can see Liquigas pushing on here just to keep a good position for their leaders and to get them onto the climb in a safe position.
This is the remains of the breakaway. 48 seconds only as Romain Bardet, doing his career no harm at all, actually, having done this in Catalonia. Pushes on as hard as he can. Sebastian Delfosse tries to stay with him. Enough of that, says the Landwehr credit rider. Can't do that anymore. Looks like the only man to be able to go across to him is Alex Howes. And Howes in the wheel tracks of Romain Bardet as they go up over the Goldenberg. There we go. You can see just how slow things get here. It's a very steep climb indeed. Chavanel in the French champions jersey moving up a little bit into the shoulder of Mathieu Carrara, I think. These two away by themselves now. The remains of a 9-man break. Who were these two here? Alex Howes and Romain Bardet. Bardet of AG2 Le Mondial in the blue. Alex Howes over the top now for the final time on the Goldenberg. Come the peloton. Bit of a feed station here. Good place to put a little bit of a dig in, Sean, if you feel you've got the legs, because in 26 kilometers to go, you can sprint over the top of this and straight through the feed section, and the peloton is inevitably going to get held up a little bit if anybody wants any bottles. Yes,
well, there is going to be a little bit of confusion. Riders and teams want to, you know, hand up bottles, and if you can just, you know, pull out 100 meters just over the top of the climb, or even 50 meters, as we see Simone Pozzi doing here. But you know, you need somebody else to come across. You need 5 or 6 riders to start working together, because if we have a bunch, as we can see here behind Pozzi, well then you're going to get swallowed up very, very quickly. And the effort you're going to have to make from here to the next climb, you're going to pay very quickly on the following climb if you're on your own out there hanging 10 seconds, 15 seconds in front of the main bunch.
Well, they're working hard. Bardet looks the stronger of the two. Howes gets into time trial mode, and they're all good. The time trialists, all good. The riders from Garmin Baraku, they're all good time trialists. Simone Pozzi, here is the rider from Astana, and giving it everything he can. Nothing to lose. Be allowed to be. The beginning of the day, they probably said if you're feeling good and you're up towards the front at this particular point, then go if you can. Not just to him, but to anybody. Ponzi's been the one who's managed to do that. We've seen Iglinsky already having a little bit of a go. I thought Iglinsky might well have been able to show in the final, but they've also got Robert Kieselowski and Enrico Gasparotto as well. Now, Gasparotto on a really good day, could be a very big threat, but remains to be seen. It's difficult to know. Nice to see that the Belgian champion Philippe Gilbert, and the winner of the last 2 editions of this race, up towards the front in the Belgian champion's jersey. Maybe he is indeed just targeting these Ardennes Classics and not being super right the way from the beginning of the year onwards, which I think personally is a good thing to see. Seeing riders who say, right, well, these are going to be my goals this year. And very old style, like a Bernardino, for example, coming early into the season, carrying about 3 kilos or 4 kilos too much and cursing and swearing as he went through the first races down on the south coast of France until he lost them and was absolutely battering people by the end of it. Used to get these, used to be far more of that, Sean, didn't we? People came into the early season maybe at a couple of kilos overweight, and they'd have certain riders anyway and ride themselves in. I mean, I hope I'm not overstating it, but one of the reasons you did so well early season is you didn't carry that sort of weight. You did a lot more training. Yes,
well, some riders have much more difficulty in getting off that extra 3 or 4 kilos. They need, a number of months, and other riders, 3-4 weeks, they can get it off so quickly. So it depends on each individual. But it's something that the riders now, they have it very well calculated. The teams, they have a coach. All the riders in the professional teams, they have their own coaches that they haven't got it in the team. So they know from year to year when they start training how many kilometers they need to get into their really good shape. But it doesn't work exactly, in that way every year. Sometimes you need an extra couple of 100 kilometers, maybe 1,000 kilometers more before you find out good shape, and that's the interesting one with Philippe Gilbert. Was he, doing this? Was it a plan from the beginning of season not to come into shape too early? But if it was, he's cutting it very, very fine, because he hasn't been good enough in the last couple of weeks for me. The last 2 weeks certainly he should have been shown a bit more. But maybe he'll surprise us all today, and we could see him just springing out here at the end and putting up a great performance. And as we mentioned earlier, this finish is, it's really made for a rider like Philippe Gilbert.
Green edge. Moving to the front, Albacini looks over his shoulder to see where Simon Gerrans is. He's right behind him, the winner of Milan-San Remo. Very well up here. Remember, he was third last year, and he's in super shape. Has he carried it from Milan-San Remo? That's the real issue. Michael Albacini, winner of the Tour of Catalonia, just drilling it on the front now for Green Edge, just keeping the pace high. These two are doing a good job at the moment. 45 seconds is the gap. There's a couple stuck in no man's land, but still got 20 odd kilometers to go. But all the big teams bringing their men towards the front now. Stortoni just about to be swallowed up by the peloton, as is Del Foss. Looks over his shoulder, thinks had enough now. But Gilbert, 1, 2, 3 back in the peloton there. 2 BMC riders only ahead of him though, and there's still a lot of riders here together, Sean.
Yes, there is a lot of riders, but I think from here on we will see this group really just blowing to pieces with this 23 kilometers to go. There's a lot of climbs to come real quickly. We have the Kreuzberg at 21.3 at 19 kilometers. We have the Eisenberg and then the Fromberg at 15 kilometers. So they come very quickly, one after the other, and that's where this group will really explode. And if you have anything left in the legs, if you have any intentions at all of getting on the podium here or getting a good place in this race, you have to be in a good position, and that means in the top 20-25. Otherwise, if you go further back, you have to make a big effort to move up, because there will be a lot of riders not capable of following it when it really starts going very, very fast. And then you have to make that effort, to close that gap of 10-20 meters, and all that little bit of extra effort you pay for it in the end.
That's it. That's what's remaining. We're on the Kreuzberg. Eisenbosberg, Fromberg, Keutenberg and Coburg still to come. Remember, the World Championships is in this area at the end of the year. Actually finishes at Valkenburg, one of the climbs on this race. That's going to be a tough circuit, Sean.
Yes, it is a very difficult circuit, and World Championships, of course, on a circuit, another big long distance race, 250, 260 kilometers, and it's very, very, wearing when you have to do 18 or 20 laps of a circuit. Always difficult, and this year is going to be a very, very testing World Championships. It's a one again for the likes of Philippe Gilbert, that style of rider who is very, very explosive. Who will be up there in the World Championships at the end of this year.
Jürgen van den Broek still right at the back of the peloton, but looking as though he's moving a little bit more easily. Vacansoleil start to put the pressure on this climb of the Kreuzberg. Gilbert looking comfortable with Gerrans behind him. That's interesting. Haven't seen him looking in too brilliant a shape. There's a fantastic picture at the Tour of Flanders with him absolutely murdering himself going up the Koppenberg. And Cancellara just sat in the saddle looking at him.
Van Avermaet is going to take it up here.
Yep.
I think there's at the moment a little bit of downtime on the front of the bunch there. You could see nobody wanted to push it on, and Van Avermaet now is taking it up. Is that a tactic? Is Van Avermaet trying to break things up, go away with a number of riders, or he want to just keep the pace high for Gilbert? That is the question. But Gilbert, very much at the front at the moment. We will see, I think, in the next climb or two climbs how Gilbert is performing. But at the moment, he looks quite comfortable there.
Graham Tankig going out of the back door. Pim Lidgaard, the Dutch champion, suffering a little bit. And BMC take it up again with Sant'Ambrogio. A sort of really tough, small Italian climber on the front, Mauro Sant'Ambrogio. Did a huge amount of work for Cadel Evans when he suffered from injury a couple of years ago in the Tour de France. And Gilbert wants to stay well up the front here, Sean, well out the way. Peter Sagan is about 20 back here. But Gilbert really does want to stay out of trouble right at the front. Very narrow roads. And that's Vandenbroek. And Samuel Sanchez trying to move back up as well. Vandenbroek is out of this one at the moment. He's tailed off the back. He's already had one crash. Caruso and Rato are past. And Samuel Sanchez is fighting to get back on terms with the peloton. Held up for some reason, Sean, mechanical maybe.
Or haven't got the legs.
Maybe, but he's chasing now, isn't he? You reckon? Yeah.
Yes, I reckon that if he was having a mechanical problem, we should see some of his teammates being pulled back and to wait with him. But the guys we have seen there, I think it's the day's work is over for them. We're not going to see him in this fighting in this final of Amstel Gold.
20 kilometers still remaining here. The Amstel Gold Classic. 1966 was the first edition, won by Jean Steblinski, the great French hardman, ex-miner domestique for Jacques Anquetil. The man who's bidding to become a three-time winner, back-to-back winner on 3 occasions, is Philippe Gilbert, the Belgian national champion. Has he left it too late coming into form? Has he got the form, or is he just riding here at the front whilst the pace isn't really going super hard? Simon Gerrans, the Australian national champion, their winner of Milan-San Remo, in absolutely blistering form this year so far. Peter Sagan biding his time behind Damiano Cunego. Cunego, a former winner from 2008. Schleck, Frank Schleck that is, a winner in 2006. Gilbert there in the Belgian champions jersey and helmet. Rather disturbingly looks like he's got an eye in the middle of that helmet, doesn't he? 2010 and 2011, and Sanchez is struggling. Romain Bardet and Alex Howes continue on the way. They've got 28 seconds. The peloton not really firing on all cylinders yet, but even so, a little bit of hope remains for the men in the breakaway. And Sanchez is taking his time getting back up to the front. A lot of riders in the peloton just looking around, seeing, oh, there's Sanchez, he's out of it. The Olympic champion. And Lotto are going to have had to alter their focus, Sean, because Jürgen van den Broek, he's fallen once today, he's gone out the back door.
Yes, and I'm not sure if Van den Broek was in that real good shape to do something here, but again, he's the style of rider capable of getting over a terrain like this, and within a team you always hope that he can get a good form, get a little bit better, and they were expecting something from him, but I don't think it's for today.
Bardet Last desperate bid to stay away. With 26 seconds, he's dropped Alex Howes. Going over the top of the Eisenbosvik. Just the Fromberg, Keutenberg and Coburg to go now. Under 20k, Howes fighting to get back on terms. Doesn't like the very steep stuff, but he's a good hard rider. And now the Omega Pharma Quick-Step team, who've had the most fantastic early Cobble Classic season, putting the hammer down here.
Nicky once again.
Yep.
And the interesting one is we see Chavanel there. Who else is, you know, within the team? Maybe Velets possibly. Martin Velets, he's also a rider that can do quite well. So within Omega, the morale, as you said, will be certainly high after, you know, the performance they've had in the Cobble Classics, and it will be interesting to see what Chavanel can do here, because he is, you know, after having a very, very difficult Cobble Classic campaign over the last 2 weeks.
They're very lucky not to have too much breeze up at this particular point, because it gets up to the top of the Eisenbosberg and it's completely openish. There's a couple of 90-degree bends in this as well.
Yes, and when they start racing, you know, and there certainly will be some attacks, and when you get an attack here and, you know, it ups the pace by a couple of kilometers per hour, well then it's very difficult in a side wind when it gets very open, and that's where you have to be so careful that you can, you know, keep yourself in a good position, but again, not too much to the front. And Philippe Gilbert, for me, you know, riding with two teammates on the front, you're a little bit too far to the front. If you can sit back in 10th or 15th position, and it all depends on how you're feeling. When you're feeling real good, you can afford to do that 15 position, even 20 position. You can sit back there, take it easy, and when the moment comes, you can move up with so much ease. So it all depends on your feeling at this moment.
This is the moment, though. Your legs have to start to talk to you properly. Radio Shack Nissan on the front now. Former winner Frank Schleck riding amongst them. It's a very strong team. Hermans, Horner, the two Schleck brothers in here. Laurent Didier, Jan Bakelens, Just Postume. These two really trying their absolute hardest to stay away as long as possible. A bid for personal glory, a fairly futile bid, I would imagine. We're still 18 kilometers to go, and there they are. Howes leads Bardet around the bend here. And went away with another 7 riders early, very early in the day. Worked well together until the latter parts of this race. On the Golperberg, it was just these two remaining. Wolfsburg and Luhrberg saw them begin to break up. Bilbao of Euskaltel went along with Cedric Pino, Stortoni, Delfos, Lieta. Still a large number of riders in this front group. BMC, they do like to control things, Sean. They do an awful lot of riding on the front. It's clearly a tactic that they've decided as a team they're going to adopt for the entire year.
Well, yes, they've certainly started out and doing that a lot in the beginning of this year, and here we are again today. The interesting one is, you know, how good is Philippe Gilbert, and we'll just have to wait and see. If he, you know, can win this Amstel Gold race today, well, then it's all worth that riding on the front. But you know, if you're not really that good, feeling that good, well, then you should kind of try and conserve your riders for a bit more and keep them for the final sprint and get you into a real good position. But only time will tell, as we can see riders having problems here.
Yeah, that's Visconti. Giovanni Visconti, the Italian national champion, fighting to get back up towards the front. It's been a little bit disappointing so far this season. Haven't seen much of him, but then again he'll be targeting racing in about 2 weeks' time when we get to the Giro d'Italia. Bardet and Howes in particularly strong form over the last week or so. And Bardet was good in Catalonia, seems to have come good again here. Still driving away, 15 kilometers to go. It seems to me, Sean, that they're just leaving these guys stay out there for just a little bit longer to minimize any chance of any sort of attack at all.
Yes, and you can see there that they are just keeping it going at a good pace on the front. The BMC riders, they're certainly not, giving it 100%. And they know with 15 kilometers to go, our 2 breakaway riders are just allowing them to hang out there. And of course, Philippe Gilbert and the BMC team, it's the way to do it, because he can take it in the sprint if he's on a good day. As we see, guessing here.
Sink. Yep. Dear oh dear. They've lost Matti Brecel, now they've lost Robert Hessink. And dear, that's not so good for them. Rabobank be desperate to try and do something here. But fear not, they still have Kruijswijk and Bauke Mollema, who we've seen up towards the front already. Valverde seems to have moved himself towards the front of the peloton just a little. So I'm struggling a bit down the back. I wonder if Sanchez has moved his way back up towards the front as well. They've been lucky with the weather. It was tipping down early in the day at the starts in Maastricht. It just wasn't nice at all. Windy, about 6 or 7 degrees. Look at Peter Sagan just hanging about there. Sean, a couple of places back from Gilbert. He always looks so comfortable when he rides. He never really moves his upper body much at all, does he? Just sits there and turns the pedals.
Yes, makes it look so easy. It's a bit unfair when you see guys like that, the way they can just sit there in a group. And Sagan is just sitting in a good position there, 9th or 10th position, everything in control. He can see what's happening out front, but not too much to the fore of the group, because you don't get that advantage of the drafting. And it's going to be interesting here. It looks like we're going to see a sprint with the big, with a lot of the big names. Philippe Gilbert, Peter Sagan. Interesting to see, what way they can fare out. And for me, they are the two big names here. If they have gotten the legs, they're the ones should be fighting it out. But still, with 14 kilometers to go, I think we will see some more attacks here. We have to see some attacks from some teams that cannot win it in the sprint. And Radio Shack, Nissan, for example, with the Schlecks, they are not going to be able to do it. So they will. Some of them have to go in the attack. As we see a Sky Rider, is it?
Yep. So Bosenhagen.
It does look the style of Bosenhagen. And also a rider like Bosenhagen, I think in the sprint he is really strong in a sprint, in a big bunch sprint, but maybe in the sprint like this here today he's a little bit worried about some of the other riders being a bit stronger.
Yep. This will start the teams chasing him down. I think he expected a little bit more from himself. Maybe the teams expected a little bit more in Paris-Roubaix, but he didn't. He was one of 4 riders up in the final selection breakaway, but or the final selection for chasing Poland, shall we say. But he didn't make it, and this will provoke a little bit of a response. No panic, but they've just got to get the gas on here, because Bosenhagen is a very strong man. It's strung them right the way up. Still Howes and Bardet are going hammer and tongs at it at the front. Motorcycle journalist and keen time trialist Mark Abbott saying, what's the moto today? Is it stuck in first gear? Sounds like it. Sounds like he's completely knackered that gearbox. Bosenhagen has got what, 50-60 bike lengths now.
It's a motorbike with a high cadence.
Yeah, that's right, absolutely. Horrible sounding thing. I think you're right, actually. Bardet leads Alex Howes through the corner with just coming up upon 10 kilometers to go. And it's Edvald Bosenhagen who struck out by himself at the moment. I don't think he's gone quite hard enough to break the elastic behind, though. And there's a number of other riders coming up around Philippe Gilbert and the BMC team. Rojas still up there as well for Movistar. Another rider we haven't mentioned, but on a very good day, wouldn't find it difficult to finish today. Keutenberg. This is the penultimate climb of the day. And these two guys have done a splendid job. Down on the remaining peloton, still a lot of riders here and a lot of big favourites here, Sean. Yes,
there's a lot of riders here, and we can only see, you know, 6 or 8 riders, and a lot of the big favourites in there amongst them, but a very big group of riders. There's probably, you know, 40 riders still here, and this is the one where we could see, and the Keutenberg could explode a lot here, but still, you know, we could see a lot of riders coming to the finish again. You know, a group of 25, maybe 30 riders, and you know, there's going to be, you know, some of the names we talked about, Oscar Freire, for example, Petit Rodriguez, he's going to be certainly there. So there's a lot of very good finishers here, and as we can see now on the climb, you know, it's BMC who are continuing to doing the pace setting.
It's a brutal little bit of climbing this. There's Edvald Bosenhagen about to be swallowed by the rest of the favourites on the Keutenberg. And Greg van Avermaet really digging deep for team leader Philippe Gilbert. Who looks behind him is a good sign if he can look and see what's going on. Alex Howes once again beginning to suffer at the legs of his breakaway companion Romain Bardet. Bardet is clearly the better of the two climbers, and they're just hanging on for grim death now, because here comes that's a great shot, by the way. Here comes the rest of the peloton. And there's a lot of legs trying to dig in very, very deep indeed. Thomas Lundqvist in the middle there, really suffering, like he's going backwards. Sanchez about a half a way back. There's Johnny Hugeland fighting to get around Sylvain Chavanel, who's suffering here. That's not a good sign. Chavanel having a very difficult time. Edvald Bosenhagen,
1-4.
Passed, and that's him out for the day, because he's tried very well. He might stay with the back of this group. Ah, there's Reza.
Is that Dan Martin?
Difficult to tell.
Looks like the style of Daniel Martin from Garmin.
A lot of riders now being shed out the back on this penultimate climb. This is where the hammer really starts to go down from those people who can still stay with the Johan von Summeren. And they're strung out. There must be, what, a minute and a half this shot now that we've had. Great to see, actually. I know the cars are all passing in front of it, but it's so interesting to see how much the gaps pull out. This guy's doing a fabulous ride. I mean, really, really a brave attempt from Romain Bardet here. He can't hang around for Howes anymore. It's not that he was attacking him, he just has to ride for harder. Stay away. Bardet is a little bit sheltered from the view of the peloton, or the group there. Look, it's split into 2 or 3 groups now, Sean, and the big favourites, most of them in that front group, but a couple of them we can see really beginning to suffer. 10 kilometres to go then. Peloton, no, what remains of the peloton and the favourites pass under the 10-kilometre to go banner. An attack coming from Astana. Looks like Iglinsky again, but it's a long shot. We'll have to get back and see exactly who it is. Number of riders really beginning to suffer. And on the penultimate climb, the Keutenberg, two or three of the big names having real problems. It's a pretty steep climb though, Sean. It's steeper than the Coburg.
Yes, it is a steep climb, and of course at this point in the race, you know, the Koburg, you have 245 kilometers covered. So, you know, anybody feeling a little bit under their best, they're going to, you know, pay the price on that one. And we did see some of the favourites, and you know, as you mentioned, David, it's amazing the way they lose time on our camera, fixed camera there on the climb. We could see, you know, they were 30-40 seconds down as they came up to the top.
Absolutely, totally strung out now. Katusha, Astana, Sky. All up towards the front. Romain Bardet, brave ride by Bardet. Begins to get taken back, and Sky again go on the charge. 9 kilometers to go. I think just wanting to get into this 90-degree right-hander. This is where Rebellin, I think, went off the road, didn't he? One time went into the field. Back on again. Still managed to win the race, though. And as you say, Sean, if you get dropped, it's a real hard fight to get back on.
Yes, it's as we can see there, there's, you know, a gap back to that a group of 10-15 riders chasing, and we see Thomas Voeckler here having a go, which is, you know, the norm for Thomas Voeckler. It's the moment to try and do something, because there's a lot of looking around here, and we see Sagan taking it up immediately. It's a real good time to have a go, because there's no team really, you know, in force here with 3 or 4 riders, and a possibility for a group to get away 2-3 riders. But again, we can see here, you know, there's the Katusha team are controlling it on the front at the moment.
That's an interesting speculative dig by Voeckler with Sagan in tow. Sagan clearly knows the form of Voeckler. He won Flèche-Brabançon in the middle of the week. He's rode away from people, but of course the rest of the peloton are aware of that as well. And they know what great form he's in. 7.2 kilometers, it says on the right-hand side. 7 kilometers, there we are, 7 kilometers to go to the finish. There's a lot of looking around here, Sean. Somebody might get the jump on them. Maybe one of those riders, they think, well, we can take this rider back. But this is the second time we've seen Oscar Freire doing this sort of ride. He did something very similar in Milan-San Remo, Sean. Went away by himself, very unusual for him. I think he realises that he's not got the top speed he once had, but he's still fighting the classics and on the climbs.
Yes, well, I think if Oscar Freire was feeling real good, normally in a sprint finish like this uphill, he was very, you know, dominant in that style of finish, but looks like that he, you know, doubts himself a little bit to leave it for the sprint and having a go here.
Extraordinarily, Romain Bardet still seems to be on the front here. Now they're coming past. Gilbert sitting in third. Cunego right in his wheel. The Lampre rider with the yellow flashes on the bike there behind the Belgian champion's jersey. Gasparotto just been pushed back in. I think it's Gasparotto. Difficult to tell from 2 men from Astana still up in this group. Voeckler has already had a bit of a pop with Peter Sagan. This is a good move by Oscar Freire. Very good move, and he's got a bit of a gap here, Sean.
Yes, he's got a bit of a gap, but I don't think with 6 kilometers to go it's a big ask, because you have a lot of riders here, and teams with, you know, 2 or possibly 3 riders, and they're always going to put a man or 2 men on the front, and you know, to hold off on your own. And if you get to the bottom of the finish here on the Coburg with 30 seconds, it's still very difficult to hold on, hold off a big group here in the final.
Freire trying to establish that gap and get away. He's trying to get onto the back of that motor there, just a little bit too far ahead, but even then it'll give him a tow. That's clever riding. Rides around, looks as though he's going to ride around the outside of it. And the moto cameraman doesn't respond, and then he flips back in behind it, getting a little bit more of a tow. Clever riding. He knows his stuff. There's Oscar Freire. He's been around for a long time. 5 kilometers. There's a lot of hard riding by Greg van Avermaet here for his team leader, Philippe Gilbert. Brave move by Freire. He's never been on the podium here at Amstel Gold. Looks as though he's suffering though, Sean, to me. Looks as though he's peddling squares a little bit.
Yes, well, I think the reason that he went in the attack, that he was not confident for the sprint. And normally, you know, when you look at Oscar Freire, the finishes he have produced in many races, classics, stages in the Tour of France, you know, normally he should be able to put everything into the final sprint here, but I think he's doubting himself and going out alone, and that's not a good indication to me. He must be feeling that he's not capable of, you know, taking this one in the final sprint, so try and goes alone. But that is a big ask here.
Very big ask. I'm just looking back down to see who is it. Thomas Dekker in this group. I failed to see the French champion's jersey of Sylvain Chavanel go flash past the cameras there, Sean. I fear he's not in this front group.
No, I think when we see him on the climb of the Kutenberg, he seems to be quite a long ways off. And as we've seen just some time ago, there was, you know, that split there. We could see the leading group of all the favourites, and then another group at 50, 75 metres, and then there was many groups further off. And I think Sylvain Chavanel was, you know, in third or fourth group at that point.
Winners of this race in the last 10 years: Eric Dekker, Michele Bartoli, Vinokurov, Rebelin, De Luca, Frank Schleck, Stefan Schumacher, Kunigo, Ivanov and Gilbert twice. 4 kilometers to go for Oscar Freire. Just 12 slender seconds here separate him from a whole group of favourites. I would not be at all surprised if we see another dig by Thomas Voeckler here and Peter Sagan. And you know what? I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see Romain Bardet have another go. He's managing to hang in with these guys, and that will give him a huge amount of confidence. Having been in the break all day, and clearly the strongest climber of them. He will want to perhaps give it another go if he can, but it won't be now until the final climb up the Coburg. And the thing is, he's got the juice left, Sean. Who knows?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult for anybody to go in the attack or to you know, get an advantage. You know, they will rather try and go in this final 2 kilometers, final kilometer, but to pull out an advantage enough to hold on the finish up to the Coburg, that is the problem. Even with Oscar Freire here, the 12-second advantage is not going to be enough unless, you know, there's a lot of marking and a lot of tactics being played. But we can see here we have 20 riders, and you know, there's always some teams who will push it on here, so it's very difficult to put out enough of an advantage to hold on the finish, which is a 1200 metre uphill.
Get on the back of that motorbike if you possibly can. Terpstra. He's already soloed to one semi-classic win this year and was present at the end of Paris-Roubaix. He's having a terrific season, and this is not the sort of man you want to let get away. Actually, if he can get across to Oscar Freire, that's a good duo. 2 kilometers remaining. They're running down to the foot of the Coburg, and the peloton are now beginning to leave it a little bit late. Remember, it's 1,200 meters of climbing, but we've seen this before. They can hit the Coburg, Sean, and they can look like they've got it clear. And because of the amount of climbing you've got to do in the last kilometer and a bit, you can get eaten up very quickly when they go on the attack behind.
Yes, you get swallowed up so quickly, and when you make the effort, of course, as we have our two leaders, Oscar Freire and Nicky Terpstra here, you know, they're making a huge effort just to hold off the group of 20 riders with a lot of the big favourites in there. And if you can be in the drafting in third or fourth position, you can conserve so much energy at this point of the race, and then when they take it up in the final couple of 100 metres, you know, the advantage, it just drops down, and you know, 10 or 12 seconds, it just comes down very quickly as we come to this final left-hander where we start the final 1200 metres.
Here we go, under the kilometre to go banner, and in this last 800 metres it's Oscar Freire being chased by Nicky Terpstra. And here come the rest of the peloton, and Wegamann leading around 13 seconds now is the gap from Freire to this big group of finishers. Freire has dug in. He committed himself, what, 11 kilometres ago? The former multiple world champion, with Terpstra trying to get onto his wheel. This is a terrific ride by Freire. They've got to go for it from behind now, and it's Philippe Gilbert leading the charge. Gilbert, who's kept his best form until now, clearly looks over his shoulder to see who's going with him. Iglinsky is on the wheel.
Having to take it up early.
Very much so, take it up early. They swallow up Nicky Terpstra. And here comes Gilbert. Oh, look, he's done it. He's leaving the form. Whoa! Down in the middle goes one of the riders. I think Cunego has gone down there as well. Getting clipped from behind and taken off. Sagan. Oh dear, oh dear. It's, was it Nordhaug? And Cunego going down. Freire's hanging on to for grim death here as Philippe Gilbert tries to close down on the Spaniard. Has he got enough time to do so? Sagan is in the wheel as well. And Sagan, looking the stronger, goes around the front of Philippe Gilbert. He's got nothing left in the tank, with Enrico Gasparotto getting in the wheel. Is that De Grief from Lotto going for it now? Oh, Gasparotto gets the win. Enrico Gasparotto. That is a brilliant ride. We said he was the sort of rider when he's in super form could really be a danger here. We picked him out about 20 kilometers ago. Enrico Gasparotto wins a classic, a former Italian champion, and he's always been a great rider. And Peter Sagan misses out again. Just his time will come. But Enrico Gasparotto is man of the day today, and it shows what a tough finish that was. Oh, that's a great win for the Italian chum.
Yes, and what a struggle. Everybody gets the line. We could see Gilbert having to take it up because he was panicking that Freire was going to hold on, and he had Sagan, he had Gasparotto, and was that Jelle Vanendert was up there?
Couldn't work out with it Vanendert or
from the Lotto Belisol team,
yep,
but
yep.
you know, what a battle to get to the line. The last 50 metres, everybody was just fighting with their bike, and Gasparotto was the one who was just that little bit extra left off.
Gilbert tried valiantly to get that 3 in a row. He's certainly coming to form, but he had to go from such a long way out. Gasparotto with Peter Sagan in his wheel here. Now, at this point, it looks like Sagan is the strongest. He goes around the right-hand side, looks over, sees Gasparotto moving up. He knows that he's not strong enough at this point. He's done too much. Freire gets eaten up. Sagan drives to the line. Gasparotto just waits in his wheel. And it's Enrico Gasparotto who takes it up ahead of Vanendert. Well, Philippe Gilbert took the fight on very early. Sean, last year's Philippe Gilbert would have been able to take that. Oh, and look at that. Damiano Cunego coming down hard. I think the other rider was Lars Petter Nordhaug. Brave attempt by Oscar Freire. And looks over his shoulder to see where everybody is, digs in, but he knows it's not to be for him today now. He can still take a 4th spot. Brave move by Freire to go 11 kilometers out, but great ride by Enrico Gasparotto.
And a great tactic move by Gasparotto. We could see him there when Sagan was taking it up on his right hand side. He just held off for a moment and took it up at the real good time, and just had that little bit more power left.
It's always been a good rider. And let's have a look. Oh, clearly a desperately difficult injury, and that it was Lars Petter Nordhaug, the man who fought tooth and nail with Russell Downing for the Tour of Ireland a few years ago. And Sagan misses out again, and he's hungry, isn't he? He doesn't say an awful lot, Peter Sagan. He has facial expressions. I'm sorry, Sean, he does remind me of you so much. He doesn't say an awful lot, but when he looks disappointed, and then there's a flash of terrible disappointment goes on his face, and then a flash of, right, well, next time is another day. There, look, what are you doing? What are you doing, says Nordhaug. This is the final run in towards the line. And Oscar fighting to try and get there. Gilbert eating up the ground between them. And those other 3 men feeling strong today, Sean, just had to sit on the wheel of Gilbert once they'd seen him go, and just take that little bit extra tow. Let Gilbert do the work and then all fight it out between them.
Yes, we could see Gilbert, Philippe Gilbert had to take it up that bit earlier, and you know, Freire, you know, you have to hand it to him. He put in a great battle there. He got much further than I had expected him to get on this final run-in of 800 metres. And Gilbert taking it up, and the other ones just, you know, following him and staying in his slipstream, and everybody just waiting. And Gasparotto, as I said, he was the one who really calculated very well. And it's all about calculating on this run-in, because it's a very, very difficult finish, and you have to, you know, get your calculation right.
The win goes to Enrico Gasparotto. Great finish by Jelle Vanendert. Peter Sagan misses again. So, Amstel gold won by Stablinski, first of all. Frenchman was the first man to win. The Dutch have always wanted to win here in their home classic, but it's not to be for them once again this year, with Enrico Gasparotto taking the win ahead of Jelle Vanendert of Lotto, and Peter Sagan missing out again. He's so close. Giro del Trentino between now and next weekend's Liège, Bastogne-Liège, with myself and Sean. In the middle of those two, it's Flèche Wallonne with Colt Kirby and Magnus Backstedt. We will be back for another classic in the saddle from 14:15 next weekend, the final of the Ardennes Classics. As I say, Flèche Wallonne in between us. A Giro del Trentino. Welcome into the box with me anyway, for a long time. Dan Lloyd will be with me. From Sean and myself, great win for Gasparotto. Sagan misses out again, so does Gilbert.